Man, oh man, have we seen a masterclass in how to lose in the NBA and just how a bunch of failures can stack on top of each other, how a bunch of decisions can stack on top of each other and give you a negative outcome. And it is really astonishing to see because we see it every single year about not only how the players fail themselves, but also how the coaches fail themselves and how the front office failed themselves. And the best place to really start is the Clippers. The Clippers has had a horrible season, one of the most up and down seasons you possibly can have. Before they got James Harden, they was really on the up and up. They was actually on fire. They won a lot of their first few games. And then they got James Harden, and then they had a cold streak where they could not win a single game. They started out cold, but eventually, as they got to learn together, how to actually play together, James Harden fit on the team, and then they actually, started to heat up. They won a bunch of their games, and then you start to hear at least people like me to say that okay, maybe they do have some championship on their horizons or something that they can actually look and strive towards for. But what happened is the All-Star break kind of caught up with them. Now, if you were following this channel for a very long time, I've already pretty much documented their progress throughout the season and have told you that consistently there was issues with this team. But eventually, as a lot of things happen, when you heat up, you kind of have to cool down. And so after the All-Star break, they pretty much was kind of cold. It wasn't the same Clippers team. Now, many people have many different theories on why that is the issue, but I think part of it is that, you can only be hiding your weaknesses for so long until teams start to adapt. And when they start to adapt, you're going to actually be having a lot of problems, especially with the way that, at least Tyronn Lue coaches. He's a very smart basketball mind, but he kind of falls back onto hunting mismatches, which is okay, but it does not give a lot more space for the role players to kind of have shine in their game. It's a lot of ball dominant. You need to have the ball in the best player's hands, which I'm not necessarily against. But where's the ball movement? How are we going to get the others involved? Because you can score 60 as a dominant trio or 80 as a dominant trio, but in today's NBA standards, you score 80 in the game, you most likely losing by 20 or 40. And so there's a lot of issues that was going on with this team that kind of was just left underneath the surface. But because they were winning, we all thought that everything was all good and dandy. But like I have said before, this was not it. After the All-Star break, the team felt a little bit disjointed. It felt a little bit out of whack. Nobody really knew what was happening. Kawhi Leonard, who was once pretty much healthy the whole season, started to get a little bit ticky-tacky injuries. Now, I understand that many people will look at Kawhi Leonard and be like, hey, he needs to be kind of available all the time. But people don't understand with the history that he has for his knee, we're honestly astonished that he could even finish out a 40-game season. And that's the reality of things. His knees are cooked. There's really not much left in there. And so whenever he has knee issues, yes, he has to sit out because it is that serious. But even still, with the way that this team is kind of made and formatted, I still believe that with Paul George and James Harden, this team could be really, really good. And so we kind of see, at least for bits and pieces throughout the season, that actually is true. But one of the biggest issues that I've had with this team for a very, very long time is their shooting. Now, not necessarily the shooting of everyone else on the team. Is really difficult to get up shots when you're not necessarily in the offense, and you have to kind of do what you can with 10 seconds left in the shot clock, and you have to make a quick decision. But more so on James Harden and unbelievably Paul George. James Harden specifically is one of those players where if his shot is on, it is amazing. He's one of the best basketball players you can have on the court. However, if he is missing a few of them shots, right, it is very, very difficult for him to really stay in the game because one, you're already lacking on defense. James Harden on defense is not great at all. And for me, it is the effort, right? The effort is contagious. When you're seeing one of your best players not even try to actually contest a shot, not even try to actually play on-ball defense, not even try to play off-ball defense, it is emblematic not only of the team culture, but also Tyronn Lue as a coach to not get on his players to say, hey, if we're going to win, we need you to play defense. Because it is unbelievable how bad his defense was. But the reality is, coming into the playoffs, the Clippers were hurt. They didn't really have the best Kawhi Leonard. He was pretty much out. But outside of that, they had Paul George, they had James Harden, they had everybody else in the crew. They just missed their number one contributor, which I will say is a huge thing, especially if he is taking that much of the cap space. But like I said, the way the team is built, it is made for Paul George and James Harden to kind of succeed. And so they're going against the Mavericks, who, props to the Mavericks, because I have always been on them saying that their offense doesn't work. And they have actually instilled a little bit more ball movement in their offense, which is allowing more and more players, not only just, the main two duo, but also more players to kind of get more involved. But essentially, the Mavericks, the role players, they're just hitting shots. They're doing what they're supposed to do, right? But they are red hot. They have an ego to them. They are extremely confident because they just won a whole bunch of games before the playoffs started. And this is something that a lot of other people have been expecting of them to kind of be the team that we all thought that they could be. And right now, depending on how they play in this Thunder series, we might see the Mavericks going to the Western Conference Finals. But regardless, the Mavericks is playing the Clippers, and James Harden is having on and off games, just like I predicted when it comes to his shooting. When you rely so much on your shot and you're not hitting shots, you're going to be out of the game. But what was more of a surprise for me was really how bad Paul George played. And not even just bad, but also the lack of effort. Now, I can get by with a player who is trying, like a Steph Curry when he was getting hunted on those pick and rolls and trying to get mismatched whenever the Cleveland Cavaliers was playing against them. And you could see that he's trying. He's at least trying to stay in front of the guy. He's at least trying to play good defense. But Paul George pretty much pick and chose when he wanted to play defense. His on-ball defense was pretty good, as it always is, and sometimes he could get steals within the passing lanes or just, poking the ball loose from the ball handler. Because there were certain games where he did have a bunch of steals. But when you look at the totality of the game, where you're supposed to be there in help coverage, help the helper. If there's a pick and roll and you're on the backside, you're supposed to help the roller, the man who's helping the ball. But Paul George is just the lackluster energy. A lot of times where I see a lot of Mavs players, the role players, getting wide open shots, Paul George just staring at them. No sense in the world, no urgency in the world to actually close out at least once. At least once. You could count it how many times you have seen Paul George look at a person that's on the three-point line and not even try to at least close out. Not even try. And then when he does close out, he doesn't have a hand up. And so when he's not on, it seems like he's totally out of whack. Me personally, I don't even think he wants to be here. I felt like when he came onto the court, his whole energy was off. He already had an interview where he pretty much, it wasn't necessarily a bad interview about him and James Harden, how James Harden was having a little bit of a shooting slump within the season. But it's not necessarily the message you want to send when you're a 1-2 tandem punch and your guy is basically saying it's not my job, it's coach's job. And then one of the worst things of all time, because a lot of people love ragging on him, but we have to keep it a buck, is that Russell Westbrook struggled. He struggled mightily in the playoffs. And it doesn't help that at one point he was shooting 4 for 32 in the series. 4 for 32. Now listen, I love his energy, I love his style, I love his passion, but there are certain times where you need to kind of just figure out other ways to make your team succeed. Because 4 of 32 is tragic. That's a tragedy. There's no way that you can bolster your defense and actually have people to get off of your name than to shoot 4 for 32 at one point in the series. So he's already a non-factor. Their best bench players were actually Norman Powell, who's always consistently great. Shout out to Norman Powell, because Norman Powell is one of the best role players in the league, especially backup shooting guards, but also Ivica Zubac, right? So you have these two best, role players who's playing the best that they possibly can for the team, but every one of their stars, every one of their top producers are just failing their job. James Harden failing his job. Paul George failing his job. Kawhi Leonard hurt. Russell playing. And right now, we don't know the future of the Clippers. The Clippers' future is quite literally up in the air. We don't know if Paul George is going to be gone. We don't know where Russ is going to go. Kawhi Leonard might have one more year. But James Harden, I think this is probably his last rodeo. This Clippers team will change. So expect in the free agency that this is going to change mightily, especially with the fact that there are rumors that Paul George is looking for a max contract, and really probably the best place for him to go is Philadelphia, where he can match up with an actual true point guard with Kyle Lowry, if he's still going to be there as a backup, but also you still have, the young gun talent and Tyrese Maxey, and then you have one of the best and most dominant centers in the game in Joel Embiid. But the Clippers, this team might actually be in rebuild soon. They might be in rebuild soon. They need to get their picks back. They need to try to do something to actually salvage the situation, because the Clippers have been a monumental failure for the last 5 years.